Hello and welcome to the Under Centre podcast. I'm your host, Darren Marr, and I'm joined by two of the three biggest Office fans there is, Fionn Malloy and Jake Woolhead, and I'm the third. So lads, how are we?
Doing pretty well. The two TV references on the first on two shows this week, so that's pretty good. I am a huge US Office fan and a UK Office fan, so that rings true for me.
I am purely US Office. I thought the English one was a load of shite.
Well, I got introduced to The Office through the US one, and then I had to go back to watch the UK one. So I think that might have been spoiled for me a little bit after watching the US one first.
The first episode of the UK and US one nearly match each other word for word. It's so strange.
Oh yeah, pretty much the whole first season, I think, definitely does. And then they just went on their own route, which ended up just being fantastic. And you know, Ricky Gervais is just loving the amount of money in his back pocket because of this. But anyway, once again, we are not a TV show. I promise you this. I know it's two TV references in a week, but we're not going to keep going on with that. We are an NFL show. And on today's show, we are going to be continuing our off-season series, and we are talking about the Las Vegas Raiders. And on the show to talk about the Raiders off-season is Heidi Fang of the Las Vegas Review Journal. Heidi, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me on. And I'm excited to be with so many Office fans. I'm currently rewatching it as well. The pandemic did that to me. So I'm on season 6 now of my second viewing through The Office.
Nice.
I think
I must be four rewatches through at this point in this pandemic alone.
Get you through it for sure.
It is definitely that show in my house where if there's nothing on the TV or you're not doing anything, it's just on in the background. It's just always playing through the whole time.
We have to remind everybody, we are not a TV podcast.
I don't know. I think we could get an Office episode out of this. We'll see. It might be good. But before we actually do get into the show, if you are watching this on YouTube, if you can you please like this video and subscribe to the Dynamo Podcast Network, because that is where you will find our podcast each and every time we upload a new video. If you prefer listening to the audio version of the show, just do the exact same thing. Just search Dynamo Podcast Network wherever you get your podcasts, and that's where you'll find our show each and every time it's uploaded, as well as some other fantastic podcasts for wrestling fans. There are retro movie fans, if you like that too. You know, comic books, the round football, we'll call it here. That's also up there too. So just have a look there and you'll find theirs as well as so many other great podcasts. But let's talk about the Raiders, and let's start with the move to Vegas, actually. And Heidi, I want to know, how has the move gone down over the last year? Because I actually was in Vegas around 2019 when it was announced it was our last year in Oakland, and people, especially around Vegas, were very excited about having the team move to the desert.
Yeah, it was very exciting going through the entire process. Not so exciting in the 5 days I spent up in Carson City where all of the legislature went through. That was rather the dull part of it. But once I got into the move itself and they started seeing the stadium come to fruition, the whole city was really excited about that. But once the pandemic hit and we heard that there would be no fans allowed, it kind of brought a damper over the last season. I know a lot of people had anticipated, gracing and christening the stadium, if you will, and that didn't get to happen. And for the players in the first season here, I know it wasn't what they expected. They were looking forward to having the hoopla and all of the fanfare and the big welcome to Las Vegas type game, and that really didn't happen. They had their big home game. I can tell you there were no more than 20 people in the stands. That was myself and 19 other photographers. So it wasn't what everybody had hoped. And I'm looking forward to see how this year pans out. As I heard in an interview that I had with Bill Hornbuckle, who's the CEO of MGM and also a part of the board of directors on the stadium board for the Las Vegas and Allegiant Stadium. He had said that he's anticipating a full stadium come July, so that these restrictions will be lifted, that we'll be able to have more mass meetings like this. I don't know how the procedures will go about, but that was the hope. And I think yesterday, the governor of Nevada somewhat reaffirmed that when he said that they were lifting a lot of the mandates with social distancing and all. So that is giving a lot of promise to a 2021 season that should have been what the 2020 season was thought to have had.
And that Raider Stadium is absolutely beautiful as well. It is stunning.
Well, that's one question I want to ask as well is, does anyone know what the air conditioning costs are going to be when it's packed full of stands having a jet black stadium in the middle of the desert? It must be astronomical to cool that thing down.
That's a great question. And it's probably very astronomical, I'd imagine. And then on top of that, they're keeping the field underneath in a turf tray so that it doesn't dry out, because as you know, if you left it out and with the elements and what have you, just touching it, I'm sure it would kind of crumble out and not be what they want it to be, the pure green Bermuda seeded turf that comes out on Sundays. So yeah, it's gonna be probably rather expensive, I can't imagine.
Heidi, go
ahead, Jake.
Heidi, I was just reading, you mentioned the fans and the big welcome to Las Vegas. The one thing I had read, and one only criticism about being in Las Vegas, is it's such a tourist spot that having a home crowd might be a bit more difficult than having like your typical home crowd, the Las Vegas Black Hole at the end, in the end zone. So is there any fear or any thoughts about how the stadium is going to be based and how filled with tourists basically it could be?
Yeah, the benefit that Las Vegas has is it is a tourist destination. And it's one thing for me I've noticed right away when I moved here is it was very transient. And now you're starting to see, though, LA people that had the Raiders there when the Raiders spent the, decades or so there, that they are able now to go, hey, that's a quick drive for me. I can go up there, see a game, 4 hours, head home that night, or enjoy the city if I'd like. For fans in the Bay Area, it's closer to a 9-10 hour drive or so, but it's still doable on flight, an hour flight in, an hour flight out, lots of affordable options as well. So I figure that it will be easy to fill, being that it is so close to where the home fan base is. And then fans will want to see it as well, because like you said, it's just a beautiful stadium, very pristine. I can't wait to see what it looks like with fans in it, what it sounds like, how the acoustics differ, just different things that you can't match without having a crowd there. So it's something that I'm looking forward to seeing. And I think that they'll have no problem whatsoever with their personal seat licenses that they had already had in place. Those sold out. So I'm sure that they have no problem getting the packed house that they want when it comes time for the football season.
Definitely, for sure. And there was an interesting thing that happened throughout the last season as well, because it was an empty stadium. The owner, Mark Davis, refused to go to home games because if he said that the fans couldn't go, he wasn't going to go.
Yeah. And we'll see that, he lifted that for some of the away games. I saw him in Los Angeles, I saw him in Carolina, and I saw him in New England. I don't know that he would do it for the home. Like you said, he was still pretty true to that. I think, though, this season it's going to be a full house, and I don't think we'll have any problem with Mark Davis attending. But I like that he did that. He showed his solidarity with his fan base, and I think that resonated with them.
Yeah, and getting into the football side of things, just a quick review of the 2020 season, because they made a strong start with going 6-3 in the first 9 games, including winning at the Chiefs, but then sort of going 2-5 for the rest of the season and missing out the playoffs. The team seemed to run out of steam.
Yeah, and something that they're going to have to correct and figure out definitely is how to get over that hump, because it's the second season in a row actually where they've been at that same mark. So you start looking at it in this season, and a lot of people had said this is going to get easier for them down the stretch. And the thought was, okay, they're going to face a winless Jets team. They got past them, but just barely. It was a nail biter of a game. And then you go on and on and on and see the mistakes that happen in other games that they should have won, and defense allowing many more yards than they should have to have had the result they should have come at a certain one. So I think when you started looking down the stretch, there was some coaching that could have been fixed. A lot of times when they're kicking for field goals and getting 3 points as opposed to going for the touchdown to get 6 points, a lot of people questioned that and said, why not go for the jugular? Why aren't you going for the 6 points? Instead of you're going for the safe 3, which turned out in a couple of cases not to be the way to go. Ooh, Guinness. Sorry, I digress, but
we're actually trying to get a sponsorship at the moment. We're putting out good energy to try and get a few cases over.
If you know of anybody in Guinness, we.
Well, it is lunchtime here. Yeah. I don't have a cold Guinness ready, but I do have. I got some beer steins in the freezer. I just need a cool Guinness to pour into it. So anyhow,
Yeah, we're just trying to sly product placement here at the moment, so just so
yeah,
they
it's
know us.
beautiful.
We're
It's
inceptioning
beautiful.
sponsorship.
So yeah, to answer the question though, sorry, I digress. I saw Guinness and yeah, you get through it and you start thinking, well, what do they do? And I think it's a lot of those calls that need to change, and also some more red zone efficiency and how they do that and come up with better game plans and better plays to try to get those 6 points as opposed to the three when they need it. That's going to come from the coach's mindset and then the personnel that they have on the field. So I'm curious to see how that works out in this coming season.
Heidi, just to kind of follow up on where we were going with that question, obviously you mentioned some of it's on the defense, some of it's on the coaching. Of course, quarterback by way of their position also gets some heat for when teams underperform. In your opinion, Gruden obviously has that massive contract, and we spoke about it a little bit last week, thinking maybe that was a little bit of a publicity stunt. Maybe that 10-year, 100 million is a lot of money. Who do you think's on a hotter seat at the moment? Is it Gruden or is it Carr, based on how underperforming definitely last season, but maybe you could argue over the last few seasons the team has been?
I think it would be on Carr more so than Gruden, just because I don't think that the front office has any intention of removing Gruden at any time soon based on the money that they have guaranteed him. So when I think about it, I put Carr in that seat more so than Gruden just because of the circumstance. But with Carr, the fan base has always had this love-hate with him as it is. And so when he has a stinker of a game, they're more likely to start throwing the Rotten Tomatoes at him than they are to Gruden, though I'm starting to see more of a fair share between the both of them. But yeah, I would lean with Carr just because there's been some questionable times when he's fumbled up the ball or when he's thrown the ball away on a crucial down when he could have tried to make something of it, even if it comes up a bad play. At least he tried to make that play. So I think that's more so what the people want to see from him than the nice safe catches, if you will. Sure, he's got great numbers, but when you're talking about on a moment of a game, a very pivotal moment, what's he going to do? Is he going to cough up the football, or is he going to try to make a play and do everything that he can in his power to get that 6 points scored? And that's where I think in decision making, sometimes we've seen the latter. So that's where I think a lot of people are having issues with him. And I think that's why he would be more so in the hot seat.
I think like Derek Carr is well known for used to being able to have a bit of hero ball in him. But if you were to ask me of one thing I remember from Derek Carr, and I think he's done it multiple times now, is fumbling the ball through the end zone, and that's just like a typical Derek Carr memory for me. And I think for me, he's definitely in the hot seat. Like for Fion's question, he's so much more in the hot seat, much to his brother David Carr's dismay on Twitter, apparently.
Yeah, his brother will always get out there and defend him. That's for sure. There's the whole Carr army out on Twitter that I'm sure if they're watching this now, I'm not saying that a Carr is, but if they are, they're saying, "Oh, let's block her." She's talking crazy about our brothers. That could happen, but I have faith that this being now the third year that he and Gruden have worked together, going into the fourth, that the two of them are going to be able to scheme a lot more. I think that there's so many intricacies with Gruden's offense and learning it than the offensive coordinators that Carr's had, the injuries that he's had. He's had it rough in the time he's been in the NFL when it comes to all the different kinds of changes and the roller coaster that he's had to vibe with. And so when you look over all those different things and take them into consideration, I think last year was a good showing for him, but I feel like this year is really going to bring out everything that he has, whether it's bad or good. We're going to see it all in this year, because I think one thing I'm going to give him already as an out is he had developed quite a relationship with Nelson Aguilar, and now he's gone. So it's how does he work with the new guys that are coming in, like John Brown that they signed in the offseason? Who's going to develop that rapport with him this year on the wide receiver side? Will it be Henry Ruggs? Will it be Brian Edwards? These are two guys with big question marks around them right now that many people want to see more results, especially from Henry Ruggs being a first-round pick. So we'll see how they develop in this offense. We'll see if they can stay healthy. And if they can, then these are going to be people who need to really step up into this offense to be able to have a productive season with Derek Carr and to build a chemistry.
It's definitely none of those guys. It's definitely Hunter Renfro is the guy now
Yes.
going forward. He's going to be the guy. But speaking of changes in the John Gruden system, a big change that we've seen in this offseason is the amount of O-linemen that have left the team. Rodney Hudson went to the Cardinals, Gabe Jackson's gone to the Seahawks, and Trent Brown went back to the Patriots. Now, the O-line coach, Tom Cable, I'm aware of who he is because I'm a Seahawks fan, so I know of his past history.
Okay.
So the Seahawks are the Seahawks time of Tom Cable was rife with issues, you could say. Because I think he tried to make sure that Russell Wilson was one of the most sacked quarterbacks in the league at the moment. Is there any? I don't know if you've heard anything about it before, but is maybe coaching an issue why there's been a lot of changes on the O-line? Because these are really, really good players, and I couldn't see why they'd want to leave.
The only reason I can come up with is the salary cap. So each team has the salary cap, and this year is much lower than it has been in the past. And with the guaranteed money that were on the contracts of Trent Brown, of Rodney Hudson, Gabe Jackson, they were able to free up a lot of money to be able to bring in some new players and also help their defense. So that's the only thing that I could really see, because obviously with somebody of Rodney Hudson's caliber, you don't want to lose a surefire center who's been one of the best protectors in the league and who really has been anchor, if you will, for this team over the past years. So I think that overall it was more to do with money and maybe restructuring contracts, and these guys weren't really willing to do what was necessary to have less money in 2021. And if you can go out while you are still a good shape and peak of your career, go earn that money. I'm not going to say or tell anybody else otherwise. I think I would have done the same in that position. If you can make $8 million or $2 million, which one is it going to be?
Exactly, yeah. But I was just going to say that,
Yeah.
but you mentioned about the relationship that Derek Carr is going to have with his wide receivers. He's now going to have to establish a brand new relationship with a brand new center too. And in another season where it looks like we're going to get another virtual off season with a lot of teams not taking part in the voluntary OTAs, we don't know about how much preseason training we're going to get again this year. It's going to be very difficult to establish that situation or that relationship if they don't get time on the field together.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And it's still a question mark of who is the right tackle. That's a huge one. Who's going to be playing guard full time? That's another one. We know that they drafted John Simpson. They have Denzel Good. He's a great versatile piece. But when you start thinking of who are the starting five, you can put your finger on two right now. And that's concerning for, I think, a lot of Raider fans. And like you said, talking about Tom Cable, how much Derek Carr will stay upright. That's huge. So you look at the center and Andre James, that seems to be who the Raiders are favoring there. They say they have a lot of faith in him. Now, they said the same thing about Darren Waller when we hadn't seen much out of Darren Waller in the 2019 season. And then he comes through and has a huge 2020 campaign. So I think that they know their team, they know the players, they have a lot of faith in certain key spots, and we're going to see how that pans out. I think, though, John Simpson, who's somebody I'm actually going to speak with in a couple of days, I'm really excited for that. He's going to have to step up huge, and he's said that he knows that there's a lot of things that he has to correct in his game. So that's something I'm curious to ask him about. And then you go over the rest of the steps, and I think Colton Miller is probably the most solid piece that you have, and the rest will have to come through the NFL draft.
Yeah. And you spoke about some of the additions. There's one addition that I want to speak about as well is Kenyan Drake, who was signed on a 2-year deal. And it looks like, Josh Jacobs, obviously in his 2 years, he's had 2 1,000-yard years with the Raiders so far, which has been fantastic. But are we going to maybe see more of a Cleveland Brown sort of style offense now with the Raiders going forward, where they have the 2 running backs that can both take up an equal amount of share and maybe take the pressure off Carr a little bit so he can maybe play more of the play action, or he doesn't have to throw it as much and maybe is not, like you were saying, in danger of not staying upright as much?
Yeah, I think that's a great plan. And I think that's something that Gruden's utilized in a couple of his really great teams when you go back to the early 2000s with the Bucks and the late 90s with the Raiders. So that's, I think, a formula that he's shown and that has worked for him and his offensive systems. So I think that that's definitely a plan for Kenyan Drake and Josh Jacobs, and as well as keeping Josh Jacobs healthy. Because when you look at the careers of running backs, it's brutal. These guys, by the time they're 30, can't run the same anymore. Frank Gore is something of a freak when you start thinking about it over time and how he's progressed and his career that he's had and the longevity. That's not everybody. So the average running back, 29, 30 years old, that's when everything starts going downhill. So to preserve Jacobs for as long as you can, to see what Kenyan Drake is capable of in third down situations, passing down situations, that's really where I think he's going to be key, as well as goal line situations when you're in the red zone. So I feel like they have now a really good dynamic in the backfield. And then you have pieces like Theo Riddick and Jalen Richard, as well as Alec Ingold, who can all chip in certain different ways and throw looks off balance that people aren't expecting when they need it. So they've got a really dynamic mix in that backfield, and I'm very curious to see how that shakes out.
And sticking with the positivity a little bit, you guys must be really excited to get a guy like Yannick Ngame over in the free agency. We were talking to about the Baltimore Ravens earlier in the season, and we heard that was one of the guys that they really wish they could keep, and again was one of the cap casualties you've already talked about. So you guys must be really excited to have him in the building.
Yeah, I think he's going to be a difference maker for the defense. There's something that the Raiders have been needing for a while, and that's a veteran presence. I don't think that he is the guy right now as far as being a massive veteran presence that's going to take all the younger defensive players and really hold them underneath his wing and say, hey, guys, I'm here for you. I don't think he's that type yet. But what I do think he brings is a great knowledge of Gus Bradley's system. And that's going to be really imperative for the Raiders defense to have somebody who can be that cornerstone that's already had experience in his system. So for what it brings also to the defense is somebody who is really a true edge setter on the defensive inside, because they haven't had that. They've had people who can efficiently hold off any push, but not anybody who can push. So to get that defensive pressure that they've been needing. And I think that's going to be huge. They really have needed to garner some pressure somehow to create situations that make other quarterbacks uncomfortable. And that's something that they've needed. And I think Yannick Ngame is definitely going to be a part of that and bringing some pass rush to the Raiders defense.
Yeah, and looking ahead now to the draft in a couple of weeks, they have 8 picks this year. What positions would you like the team to sort of address in the early rounds?
Definitely safety. The defensive back position is something I think that they've been lacking. They have re-signed Carl Joseph. They do have Jonathan Abram, but I really think they need a key free safety in there. Somebody who can just be an every down kind of guy, or more reps than the others, as you would say. So I think that they need somebody out there that can play that position for Gus Bradley, as well as tackle on the offensive side, right tackle, as I mentioned. But what's interesting to me, and I don't know how much this could come into play, is that Colton Miller was originally a right tackle and then moved over to left. So I'm wondering if they look in the draft at all for somebody who's more of a natural left tackle, or if they leave Colton Miller there. But I would think they leave Colton Miller there because they know what he can do there now, and he's built himself into that position pretty well, and he's very solid at it. So I would think right tackle would be the way to go. So yeah, those are the two right off the top. They have 17 and 48 and a couple of third round picks, I believe 79 and 80, if I remember right. So I would think with those, the first two, you would go safety and offensive tackle. Not sure in which order, because it depends on how things shake out, but I would think you would want to solidify this safety spot first.
Yeah, and looking ahead to the start of the 2021 season, the Raiders are due to be playing the NFC East and the AFC North. So some interesting games definitely coming. And of course, we have the 17th game. What are your thoughts on the extra regular season game now starting this year?
I like it. I prefer it more so than a fourth preseason game. So we're instead of 4 preseasons and 16 regular, they're going with 3 preseason games and 17, regular games. So I feel like the fourth game was always a way for the coaches to get a final evaluation of anybody trying to make the team, and nobody wanted to watch that. So if you're talking about the biggest sport in America, where people and then all over the world, right? So you're talking about the biggest sport. Well, I guess football probably wins when you talk about all of it. Anyway, we'll debate that another time. But when we get into it in American football, and then you see that final game, and it's the biggest sport here, and you're trying to maybe sell commercial dollars that pay these giant salaries. Well, I don't think that anybody wants to watch who's vying for the third position spot on the defensive line. They want to see who is going to get to the Super Bowl and how that path starts. So that would start with having a 17th game. So I love it. I think it's great. I like the way that they're going to shake it out. AFC gets the first dibs on having that extra game than NFC the next year. So I think it's going to balance out pretty well for everybody. And it's more stakes, higher stakes. I like it.
Yeah, it definitely seems to be a love-hate relationship. The fans love the 17th game, and all the players just hate it.
Oh, sure.
for sure. And you can understand why. But I think obviously a lot of players were saying that they wanted the second bye week, and I think that'll come whenever they add the 18th game, which will probably come sooner rather than later as well. So I think that's why they were saving the second bye week, because I think I read a report before that I think they want the season to finish mid-March, so they want to keep it going as long as they can. And look, as long as I don't have to wait 6 months between seasons, I'm all for. These 6 months are killer. I know the draft and free agency is fun, but no, I just want to see football. I don't want dull stories.
As a fan of like one sport, and now the F1 maybe a little bit, I definitely don't want to be waiting 6 months in between matches.
Yeah, that's something. I actually used to do a little F1, not racing or anything, but just editing it. It was really, really interesting stuff. I got involved with it a little bit back maybe 12, 13 years ago.
It's all the Netflix series. That's what got everyone interested in that. That's what it got me interested in it again, for sure. It was that drive to survive, and I think that's what everyone. But Heidi, before we let you go, where can people find your work, and if they want to follow you on Twitter?
Yeah, on Twitter, I'm at Heidi Fang, and then VegasNation.com is where all of the articles are with the Raiders, videos, everything. Today, I'm getting a special behind-the-scenes tour of the Raiders headquarters, so that will be put out. I don't know how many others have been invited, but I feel like I'm special right now. So I'm really excited to go and get a behind-the-scenes look, and they're going to show us around, and I'm going to have that video up. And then Takeaways is the name of my Raiders podcast, and you can find that also on Vegas Nation, and it's free. So make sure to go in there, take a listen, hit subscribe.
There we go. So once Guinness is finished sponsoring our podcast, you can sponsor that podcast there as well, because you've got the perfect colors anyway set up for it. So you're all set. Thanks so much for taking the time to speak to us today. We really appreciate it, and we hope that we can speak to you again, if not before the season starts, at some point during it.
I'd love it. Thank you so much for having me on, and I really enjoyed it, and have a great day, guys.
Thanks, Heidi.
Thank you very much.
Awesome. Just before we go, if you haven't already, please like this video and subscribe to the Dynamo Podcast Network. That's where you're going to find our podcast each and every time we upload a new one. Also on the audio side, the exact same, wherever you get your podcasts, just search Dynamo Podcast Network. You'll find us there. Make sure you subscribe to it too, so you'll get the podcast each and every time we upload. While you're at it, go to our socials as well, facebook.com/undercenterpod, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at undercenterpod. Guinness, that's where you need to go to sponsor us as well. But that is it for the show.